This video is protected under international copyright, which is held by Fire Training Videos Limited. This video is copy protected using macrovision, and it's an offence to copy, edit, broadcast or alter this video in any way without the prior permission of Fire Training Videos. When we're making a video, if someone makes a mistake, we can simply shout "cut," sort out the problem, and roll the camera again. Unfortunately, if you're faced with a fire, you don't have this luxury. You must get it right first time. Although fire extinguishers are designed to be easy to use, you need to know which types of fire each is suitable for, because using the wrong extinguisher is likely to cause the fire to grow, or it could result in you becoming a casualty of the fire. Training in the use of firefighting equipment is especially important to ensure that you have the necessary information to choose the correct extinguisher without putting yourself or anyone else in danger. This video is about the use of the different fire extinguishers you may come across around your workplace. And over the coming minutes, you'll see the different types of fire extinguisher available, how they're operated, how to apply their contents correctly to the fires you may find yourself facing, the safety aspects to be considered before attempting to fight a fire, and any safety consideration associated with the different extinguisher types. BSEN 3 was introduced in January of 1997 as part of the ongoing European standardization. It's the manufacturing standard for portable fire extinguishers. EN3 is not something new. In fact, it's been around since the late 1960s. While most of the requirements of BSEN3 will not directly affect you, the way that the body of the fire extinguishers are now painted does. Before January 1997, fire extinguishers purchased by your organization were generally painted and identified according to their contents. For example, the water extinguisher was normally painted red. Foam was cream-colored. Dry powder blue. And CO2 was painted black. This is where you'll see the most significant difference in the extinguishers, as now all extinguishers must be painted red. The contents of the extinguisher are identified by a colored area, which can cover no more than 5% of the extinguisher body. The way the contents are identified varies quite considerably from one manufacturer to another. However, the color codes to which we've been accustomed for many years still apply. You will also notice there's no text stating what type of fire the extinguisher is suitable for. This information is now provided by these pictograms. For example, this pictogram indicates that the extinguisher is suitable for Class A fires, which includes materials like wood, paper, furnishings, and so on. This one indicates Class B fires, which covers fires involving flammable liquids. This one indicates that the extinguisher may be used on Class C fires, which are those involving flammable gases. Extinguishers which are suitable for use on fires involving electrical equipment will display this icon. As we mentioned earlier, BSEN 3 is a manufacturing standard and not a retrospective legislation. So, as long as an extinguisher is in good working order, it's not necessary for it to be replaced. It's therefore possible you may come across extinguishers of both standards for some time to come. For the purpose of this video, we'll be using fire extinguishers painted in both standards. Signage legislation requires that the position of fire extinguishers is indicated with either a solid red panel or a sign bearing this icon. Some sign manufacturers have produced signs like these, which indicate the type of extinguisher and the types of fire in which they may or may not be used. The firefighting equipment you'll come across around your workplace is known as first aid firefighting equipment. Like when there's been an accident, your action should be to prevent the situation getting worse until professional help arrives. Before you even think about fighting a fire, there's a few things you should keep in mind. Your first consideration must always be safety. The last thing you want to do is injure yourself or anyone else. Before taking an extinguisher, make sure that the fire alarm has been activated and that someone has called the fire brigade. You can well find that by the time you return to the fire, that it's grown larger. So the quicker help is on its way, the better. And if there's someone else nearby, get them to sound the alarm while you go and get the extinguisher. Make sure that the extinguisher you're about to use is the correct one for the type of fire you're about to fight. If you have any doubt about the extinguisher or what is burning, do not use it. Remember, using the wrong extinguisher could make the fire worse or result in you becoming a casualty. The fire extinguishers you'll find around your building are suitable for small fires and fighting fires in their early stages. So if your extinguisher runs out, you find that the fire is getting larger, other materials are becoming involved, or you feel that you're not getting control of the fire, leave the area immediately, making sure that doors and windows are closed as you go. If you can, it is a good idea to keep low. This way, you'll be able to avoid the smoke and to some extent the heat, which of course rises. Always make sure you have a way out directly behind you. Never allow the fire to get between you and your way out. Under no circumstances should you attempt to fight a fire that involves burning gases. The only action to be taken in these circumstances, and only if it's safe to do so, is to turn off the gas supply and call the fire brigade. Once an extinguisher has been operated, then it must be refilled. As you can see, with this type of extinguisher, a flag stating that the extinguisher has been used will appear. With the stored pressure extinguishers, you'll find that the pointer moves out of the green area once the extinguisher has been used. Fire extinguishers are designed to be simple to operate and use. First, remove the safety clip or pin. Aim the hose or nozzle at the fire. Squeeze the handles together and apply the contents to the fire. The way extinguishers are operated varies from one manufacturer to another, so it's important that you know exactly how your extinguishers are operated. The extinguishers you'll come across are known as controlled discharge extinguishers, which means that when you release the handles, the extinguisher will stop. The first type of extinguisher we'll look at is water. Water is the most common extinguisher in the majority of buildings, as the main risk from fire is usually presented by normal combustible materials. Materials which fall into this category include things like chairs, desks, papers, furnishings, and so on. The most effective way of extinguishing this type of fire is to remove the heat, and using water is the best way of doing this. Once you've operated the extinguisher, the jet of water should be aimed at the base of the fire, at the point nearest to you. Then moving the jet slowly from side to side, work your way to the back of the fire. As the flames begin to die down, you can move in closer. If you find yourself confronted with a fire that's growing upwards, for example on curtains, you should begin fighting the fire at its base and moving the jet from side to side, work upwards until the fire is extinguished. You will often find that although the flames have been extinguished, the materials will continue to smoulder for quite some time. So it's important to make sure that any hot spots are completely extinguished, as the fire may reignite. There are some fires in which water must never be used, because it'll either make the fire worse or it's potentially lethal. Most people are aware that water and electricity do not mix. The likely outcome of applying water on anything electrical is electrocution. And the reaction you will get by adding just a small amount of water to a flammable liquid fire can be terrifying. Not only will it intensify the fire, but it is also likely to cause the fire to spread and ignite other materials that it comes in contact with. If a flammable liquid is spilled and water is used, the flammable liquid will float on top of the water, causing the fire to spread. The most common size of water extinguisher contains 9 litres of water and will normally last for about 1 minute. And the jet of water has a range of about 10 metres. Water extinguishers are also available in 6 litres and will last for around 40 seconds. It's worth bearing in mind that the water extinguisher is fairly heavy. One this size weighs about 15 kilos. So if you find it's too heavy for you to lift and carry, do not attempt to use it, as you could injure yourself trying to do so. An additional method of fighting fires with water is the hose reels, which are fitted in many buildings. Hose reels have some advantages over the water extinguisher. They provide you with an indefinite supply of water with greater pressure. When you open the nozzle, the water will come out as a jet. If you continue to turn the nozzle, the jet will turn into a spray. The spray is ideal for damping down once the main fire has been extinguished, as the droplets of water will absorb the heat more quickly than the jet. And as you can see, the spray will allow you to damp down relatively large areas at a time. There are 2 methods of operating hose reels. With some, you must turn on the water by opening a valve that will be nearby on the pipework. And with others, the water will turn on automatically as the hose is pulled out. If you're going to use a hose reel, it's advisable to get assistance, as they can be difficult for one person to get to a fire, especially when there are doors, corners, or stairs to be negotiated. Tackling a fire involving electrical equipment is likely to be one of the more common uses of the CO2 extinguisher, and in most cases where you find 2 extinguishers together, one of those will be CO2. CO2 provides a safe, non-conductive means of fighting the fire risks presented by the electrical risk in the modern workplace. It extinguishes fire by removing the oxygen and replaces it with a non-flammable gas. This gas is stored under extremely high pressure, which makes this extinguisher very noisy when it's being fired, which often comes as a shock to the operator. While it's being fired, the discharge horn of the extinguisher gets very cold. In fact, it can get sufficiently cold for your hand to stick, which may cause frost burns. It's a little like when you take ice cubes from the freezer, they stick to your fingers. Except the temperatures are much lower, so the damage to the skin tissue is worse. CO2 extinguishes a fire by removing the oxygen, and therefore should not be used in a confined space. The correct technique for using the CO2 extinguisher is aim the horn at the fire and then let go of it. Remove the safety pin. Squeeze the handles together and extinguish the fire. If you find yourself confronted with a fire like this, whenever possible, switch off and unplug the appliance. The CO2 should be applied through any available opening until the fire is extinguished. The reason for switching off and unplugging first is that electricity provides the ignition source to start the fire, so once it's been removed, the fire may well die out of its own accord. CO2 may also be positioned to cover the risk presented by flammable liquids. As we mentioned earlier, CO2 is stored under very high pressure and is therefore extremely powerful. So when using it on fires like this, don't put the nozzle too close to the fire, as you could cause the liquid to splash and spread the fire. So, stand back from the fire before you operate the extinguisher. Then move slowly towards the fire, moving the jet of CO2 from side to side in front of you. A point to remember with CO2 is that although the gas and parts of the extinguisher becomes extremely cold, it doesn't have a significant cooling effect on the fire. So if the liquid is in contact with hot metal surfaces, the fire is liable to reignite. As CO2 is a gas, it's not really suited for use on fires out of doors, as the cloud of CO2 is liable to disperse before the fire is extinguished. CO2 is available in a variety of sizes, and the size of extinguisher will depend on the size of the fire risk posed. For example, these larger extinguishers will normally be found in or near to boiler houses, main electrical intakes, or kitchens, where the fires are liable to be larger. The most common size of CO2 extinguisher is this one, which contains 2 kilograms of CO2. If it's fired continually, it would last for about 12 seconds, whereas this 5 kilogram extinguisher will last for about 25 seconds. The dry powder extinguisher in most workplaces is what is known as ABC powder, which means it is a multi-purpose extinguisher and can safely be used on fires that involve wood, flammable liquids, electrical equipment, and in the hands of those who've received specialist training, it can also be used on fires which involve gases. Powder is extremely effective on fires which involve flammable liquids. The technique for fires that are running and in a container differ slightly. With a running liquid fire, the technique is to start at the lowest point and work upwards, and moving it quickly from side to side, drive the flames away from you. If the fire is contained, stand back from the fire, which will allow the cloud of powder to build up. Then, using the same rapid side-to-side sweeping motion, drive the fire to the far edge of the container. And, as the fire begins to die down, you can move in closer. Remember to keep the jet of powder moving until the fire is extinguished. When confronted with a fire on electrical apparatus like this, whenever possible, switch off and unplug. Most of the electrical equipment you'll come across will be enclosed in some sort of casing, which the powder will not readily penetrate. So it's necessary to get as close to the fire as you can, without putting yourself in danger. Then the powder is more likely to penetrate the casing. Like the CO2 extinguisher, dry powder has no significant cooling effect, and reignition may occur, so be prepared to reapply the powder if the fire reignites. As you'll probably have noticed, the cloud of powder is rather large, and indoors this can impair your vision and cause everything in the immediate area to be covered in a very fine dust that can cause damage to sensitive electrical equipment, such as computers. Dry powder extinguishers come in a variety of different sizes. Small ones like this, which are often used for vehicle protection, will last for between 6 and 9 seconds, whereas one of this size, which is the largest you're likely to come across, will give around 12 seconds of continuous firefighting. Modern synthetic AFFF foam offers a very effective means of extinguishing fires that involve either normal combustible materials and flammable liquids. AFFF, which stands for aqueous film forming foam, extinguishes Class A fires, which you'll recall is normal combustible materials, by cooling the fire, and in the cases of Class B fires, which is flammable liquid fires, by shutting off the oxygen that the fire requires to continue burning. As foam is water-based, it's not suitable for use on fires involving electrical equipment. There are two different types of foam extinguisher, and although they contain the same type of foam, they have some important differences. The main difference is the part of the extinguisher which applies the foam to the fire. This is known as a branch pipe, which introduces air into the stream of foam, creating a frothy foam which is used to blanket a fire. This nozzle will produce a fine spray of foam, which seals the surface of the fire. The foam branch extinguisher is normally found where flammable liquids present a fire risk, like flammable liquid stores, boiler houses, kitchens, or petrol stations. When flammable liquids burn, it's not the liquid that is burning, but the vapors which are given off. And some flammable liquids, like petrol, will readily produce vapors, even at very low temperatures. So the idea is to stop these vapors from escaping by covering the surface with a layer of foam. If the foam is applied too close, or at the near edge of the fire, it's liable to be forced beneath the burning liquid, making it useless. So it is necessary to force the jet to break up. This is achieved by aiming the jet of foam at the back of the fire, for example, at the back plate of a fat fryer, a wall, or any nearby adjoining vertical surface. Then, as the layer of foam creeps forward, it stops the flammable vapors from escaping and extinguishes the fire. There may be occasions where a vertical surface is not available. For example, if the liquid has been spilled, and in such cases the technique is to aim the jet into the air and allow the foam to drop onto the fire. An increasingly popular extinguisher is the foam spray, which is being used to replace water extinguishers in many workplaces. Its fine spray allows the user to attack a larger area of the fire than is possible with the jet produced by the water extinguisher. It not only cools the fire, but it also seals the surface of the burning material, thereby shutting out the oxygen. To apply the contents of this extinguisher, simply spray the foam over the surface area of the burning materials, moving the nozzle from side to side until the fire is extinguished. With flammable liquids, the technique is simply to allow the foam to gently flow over the surface of the liquid until the fire dies down. Most foam spray extinguishers have passed an electrical conductivity test, which means they may be used near to live electrical equipment. But as foam is water-based, it must not be used directly on it, as there's still a risk of electrocution. An effective means of extinguishing a fire like this is to shut off the oxygen by closing the cover or replacing the lid, or using a fire blanket. Modern fire blankets are made from tightly woven industrial fiberglass. To use a fire blanket, remove it from the container. Some blankets have tapes like these fixed to one side. If there are no tapes available, wrap the corners of the blanket around your hands like so. Then, using the blanket as a shield against the heat, gently lay it over the fire. Once the blanket is in position, the oxygen will be shut off and the fire will go out. Do not forget to turn off the appliance. Once the blanket is in place, it should be left until the container has cooled down, as removing it too soon will reintroduce the oxygen, and if the fat or oil is still hot enough, the fire will reignite. In the cases of pots and pans, they must not, under any circumstances, be moved, as the hot liquid is liable to spill, reignite, and possibly cause you serious injury. Fire blankets are also useful for wrapping around someone whose clothing has caught alight. In such cases, the technique is to help them to the floor. This is to stop the flames growing upwards to their head. As best you can, wrap the blanket around them to extinguish the flames. Then, carefully pull the blanket back and put out any clothing that continues to smolder and ensure medical help is on its way. If you don't have a fire blanket available, then you could use a coat or jacket. Just remember not to use anything that is nylon or polyester based, which is liable to melt and make the casualties' injuries worse. So to summarize, always make sure that the alarm has been operated before taking an extinguisher. Whenever possible, get some help and make sure that someone has called the fire brigade. Your priority must always be safety, so you should never fight a fire if you could be putting yourself or others in danger. And if there's any doubt about what is burning, then don't fight the fire. The various extinguishers around your workplace are provided for fighting fires in their early stages. Their discharge time is limited, so they may not last as long as you may expect. When fighting a fire, it's important to make sure you keep as low as possible. Heat and smoke will build up very quickly, so make sure that you always have a way out directly behind you. If your extinguisher runs out, you don't feel that you're getting control of the fire, or the smoke is getting too thick to see, leave the area at once, making sure that doors and windows are closed as you go. With fires involving gas, there's a danger of explosion and should not be fought with an extinguisher unless you've received specialist training. In most instances, if you can, shut off the gas supply, but do not extinguish the flames before doing so, as the escaping gas will build up and is liable to explode. Once an extinguisher has been used, then it must be refilled by the company which services your firefighting equipment before it's put back on the wall. The majority of fires you're seeing in this video have been filmed outside in the fresh air, where the smoke and heat do not present a particular hazard. But as you'll appreciate, the majority of fires you're likely to come across will be indoors, so the heat and smoke will be far more of a problem. Your prompt action with a fire extinguisher can prevent a small fire like this developing into a major incident. There is no substitute for practical training in the use of firefighting equipment. So if the opportunity arises, then take it.